afternoon, Bombardiers, or good morning, or good evening, or good night, or whatever it is where you are listening. James and Jezza can't be with me for this, so I'm your temporary host, Jason, from the glorious Great British Isles. We've got a great interview today with somebody that you'll have not only seen countless times in the original Star Wars films, but whose work you'll have seen in many films since then. His name is Trevor Butterfield, and we're very grateful to have him with us.
Yes, it's my pleasure.
We'll save your stories of Star Wars for later and start with your long and illustrious career in special effects. The most appropriate way to start, I think, would be for you to introduce us to the films that you've worked on.
Well, I've been a part of many, probably many that a lot of people won't sort of remember or heard of, but some of my most big films I've worked on, I think, really is Aliens, the second part of Alien, which was a great experience in 1986. Previous to that, I worked on, my first film was Neverending Story with Brian Johnson, making motion control equipment. And then I transpired from that to a film with Ian Wingrove, special effects supervisor on certain films. It was a film called In My Regards to Grove Street, which was a Paul McCartney production, MPL. And then I sort of went on to Last Days of Pompeii in 1983, which was Peter Hutchinson was the supervisor on that film. And then I went on to another film called Return to Oz. Then Return to Oz led to another film because it was filmed at EMI Studios in Bournemouth, and it was called Labyrinth with David Bowie. Yes. I mean, it was an enjoyable film. That was a Frank Henson production, which, working with Frank was, Jim Henson production, and, he was a great guy and sadly missed, unfortunately. But, yes, that was a great film. And then after that, I went on a film called Gumbust, which was produced at Pinewood Studios. And then that led to Aliens.
And since then, you've worked on many films from Flash Gordon, Labyrinth, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, through to the Harry Potter series and Prometheus as well.
Yes.
How have things changed over that time?
Well, over the years, obviously, CGI has come into effect, which we never had when we did films in the 80s and early 90s. But I suppose really working on Aliens, whereas, I mean, everything was built for real to work as it was made. There was not much blue screen involved, actually, but it wasn't in its infancy, but most of the stuff was mechanically made and no CGI involved, which, to my mind, producing something like that, it shows up on screen better, I think, because everybody knows what CGI is, and creating things that the computer sort of puts together, it all seems false to me anyway, but probably a lot of people don't agree with me on that score, but I find working on the last Aliens production, as you say, Prometheus, most of it, a lot of it, well, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of it was CGI, and I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen the film, to be honest with you, but I felt that we could have put more input mechanically.
Yeah, certainly CGI and modelling have dominated a lot of the special effects that we see, but there are plenty of subtle tricks that we often don't notice, such as the chocolate in place of blood in Psycho, or in The Phantom Menace, when they use, as many listeners will know, salt in place of water in the waterfalls to avoid using CGI. Have there been any little tricks like this that we might not know of in your
Yes, I mean, I did a film called Daylight with Sylvester Stallone, and he's supposed to be underneath the Hudson River. And we use sound and, as you say, to sort of make it look like sort of water swirling around a lot. And obviously the CGI took over from that and made it look as if it was water. But previous to that, I did a film, I think, which was probably one of the first big CGI films. It was a film called Dragonheart, back in '94. And you never saw the dragon itself because that was CGI, and that was the first film I really worked on, which CGI took over from possibly mechanical effects. It was the start of CGI. I mean, they wanted to make this film Dragonheart, but they couldn't really do it properly without the CGI dragon, which Sean Connery was the voice of. But I mean, it still gave us a lot of work. We had to produce flames. We had to produce the path of the dragon. Still a lot of work involved, but it was difficult to sort of think that you're working with something that you can't see.
Yeah, and it must be completely different to something that seems similar on a superficial level, such as the Neverending Story, which also has these large creatures interacting with people.
Yeah. I mean, Neverending Story. You had sort of big sort of puppets and creatures with people inside them. It's like going back to Return of the Jedi. Jabba was operated by about 6 people inside it, and if it was CGI, it would be just done on a computer. So it gave a lot of people work, and then CGI comes in, but then again, it gives a lot of people work in the computer side of the industry. So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it, at the end of the day? Yes, I mean, people come in with their computer skills who've probably never worked on a film before, and then obviously, because they're computer literate in a big way, they get work in the film industry. Whereas we had to sort of learn it through different projects that you worked on different films.
Now, you had an unusual start to getting involved in this career, I believe, working in hydraulics in Yeovil. Did you ever...
Yes, I mean, I worked at Western Helicopters, as you say, in Yeovil, because I was brought up in engineering, and I moved down from Yorkshire because Western Engineering was looking for recruitment, and being a sort of agricultural area, Yeovil, Somerset, they couldn't get the skills, and it was a time when the Lynx was in its infancy, Lynx helicopter, which is quite a famous helicopter, and I sort of applied for a job and started working there in 1972, and because of the engineering skill that they was requiring.
And you ran into a modelling agent in a pub, I believe?
Yes, it was, yes. I lived in Dorchester at the time, but I was visiting my parents in Yeovil, close to Yeovil, just for Sunday lunch, and just sat having a quiet lunch with a couple of beers, a few friends, and I was approached by this lady who said, I can't take my eyes off you. I think that, you could be very photogenic, this, that, and the other. And I thought, oh, crikey, there's a bit of a storyline or something, I don't know. So I didn't take much notice of it, but she just slipped her a card into my vest pocket, and I never thought anything about it. But I looked at it a few days later, and I thought, well, yeah. And then she turned out to be a scout, a photographic scout for a famous modelling agency called Askews. And I thought, well, I don't want to get involved in that sort of stuff. So I never sort of replied. And then I thought, well, I was just sort of curious whether it was a scam or whatever. So I just phoned the number, and it all kicked off from there.
And that's how you got involved in background acting? Well,
yes, I went down to London to see what the situation was. I sort of thought, well, it was a whole new sort of thing, wasn't it? Something completely different from working in an aircraft factory. So I suppose seeing the bright lights of London and one thing and another, I thought, well, why not make a stab at it? So I decided to sort of try it for a few weeks, unbeknown to my employees. and try to sort of join the casting agency in between modelling jobs, and I went to the film business that way. I mean, before that, there was TV stuff. There was all sorts of Minder, lots and lots of jobs I had, which not really famous, but some little sort of speaking parts, this, that, and the other. And then Empire came up, and then Raiders, and then of course Jedi.
I'll get back to Star Wars in a minute, but first I'm curious to know about your shift from a special effects technician into more senior roles.
Yes.
How much do you still do hands-on editing, and how much do you take a step back and supervise now?
Well, being a senior technician now, as I'm sort of graded through back to the film union, because of my sort of, I suppose, knowledge and the sort of, you get more responsibilities, obviously, because you can be asked what to do by a supervisor and take on a specific job with a team of technicians. But you're sort of looking after that particular job. And I think that gives me a lot of satisfaction, because it's nice to have a little bit of responsibility. And then, obviously, when you see the end product, you feel more, how can I say, you feel as if you've contributed more to the film than just sort of doing a small sort of job in the workshop or whatever.
And are there any special effects that you're particularly proud of, that was mostly your work?
Well, I suppose Aliens, you see, I started with John Richardson, who was the special effects supervisor on the mechanical side of the film. And then I was asked to go on to the creature side, which supervisor was Stan Winston of Creature Effects, which he's got Oscars for. He's quite unfortunately, he's passed away, but he's a very famous creature effects person. And he gave me the job of making all the head movements for the Alien Queen throughout the film. Whenever the Alien Queen was shown in a sort of a big sequence, all the head movements was made by hydraulics, designed by myself. So I think that was one of my highlights, because the film, it was, it came across so well, and I think it's a lot of people's favourites.
Yeah, and with the 7 films so far in the series, that was the first time we saw a full adult of the species in that manner, as it were. So you're presumably the first to control how the creature moved and felt.
Yes, I mean, Stan would say, he wanted certain movements. I mean, originally, the head was just going to move from one side to another. But once we did tests and got it together, it just didn't look right. It just looked false. So Stan wanted the head to move like a human's head, interact with things that's going around it, not just moving side to side. So I devised remote-controlled hydraulic unit, whereas it worked by hand movement, and like a joystick, in fact. And you could just move it like a human's head. Whichever way you turned the hand unit, the head would move.
And Aliens was a fantastic film, particularly for its time in terms of special effects.
Yes, I mean, it's a long time ago, and it still comes across quite good.
But the same is true of most of your other films, that they were on the cutting edge of special effects.
Yeah.
How much of that was in the innovation of the team that you were working with, and how much was simply having access to a bigger budget?
Well, I think going on to the Harry Potters, let's say, for example, I missed the first one because I was busy. I was asked to go on it, but I was doing a film called 51st State with Samuel L. Jackson up in Liverpool. And I just couldn't get away from that. I'd already committed myself to the contract. And then John Richardson called me and said, are you available? He's got this film, Harry Potter. And I thought, what is Harry Potter? I don't know anything about it. So at that time, it was only a sort of a kid's thing, you know. I mean, if you wasn't into the books, you wouldn't have heard of Harry Potter. But then, fortunately, I got a call to go on the second one. Again, Joe Richardson supervised it. And then by the time the second one was in production, everybody knew about Harry Potter. So, yes, it was a nice situation to be asked to work on the film. But, yes, the first one, it was early days. Technology wasn't as large as it is when the last one finished, the Deathly Arrows Part 2. So going from sort of the second one right to the end, each one we worked on, new technology was arriving all the time, especially in the computer side of it, CGI, and also in our workshop. And of course the budgets got better and better and better. So I think a mixture of never-ending amounts of money and the technical ability to achieve something, whereas money doesn't offer a problem.
And after Harry Potter's franchise was over, you've almost become involved in a new franchise with the recent announcement of Prometheus 2 and the...
Yes, it's a bit hypothetical. I mean, at the time we was doing Prometheus, there was talk about running back-to-back, going straight on to Prometheus 2, but that didn't happen. And there's always been talk of Prometheus 2, but I haven't heard anything personally as to what's going to happen on that score. So at the moment, I don't know anything about it, because I mean it could be a different special effects supervisor from the last one, which was Trevor Woods. Each supervisor tends to use his own crew, so it depends who gets the film produced in the special effects, whether I shall get a job, because I'm a freelance, we're all freelance, and it's a case of working under a supervisor which uses certain people he likes.
And what else are you working on at the moment?
I've just done a film called Maleficent at Blount Studios.
Maleficent sounds like it should be really good.
Yeah, it's another fantasy film, which seems to be the run of the mill at the moment. I mean, I was working on that, and then I've done several TV things. And then on the other side, I do sci-fi autographs. I'm on the autograph circuit now for the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, I did notice that your first convention was in 2010, I believe, and since then you've been around quite a lot.
Yes, I mean, work permitting. I mean, if I have a special effects contract, obviously if I'm on a film and I'm involved in a project, I just can't get away, so I just have to turn that side of it down. I mean, it's more of a hobby than I sort of class as work, but it's good. I mean, I went to Celebrations 6 in Orlando in August and met a lot of people who worked on the Jedi and Empire, and that was great. I mean, Dickie Beard, the stunt guy, and Jeremy Bullock, Boba Fett. I hadn't seen them since the Star Wars days, so that in itself was very rewarding to see those people again.
It must be a pretty rare thing in any industry to have people asking you 30 years later about the job you worked on for 3 weeks, which I believe is how long you spent on Empire Strikes Back, and then over 13 weeks doing background work in Return of the Jedi as well.
Yes, I mean, I was lucky really, because I was very friendly with Roy Button, the second assistant, and if he was... what kind of put it? If he was the right size and fitted the costume, he got the job. And if he was, punctual and good at what he was doing, then you got the work. And it was an eye opener. I mean, I would have thought 30 years later that these first 3 Star Wars films are sort of acquiring new audiences. People at Celebration 6 especially, young children would come up and ask for your autograph. I mean, 10 years old, and well, it's 30 years ago in April of this year I started on Jedi, so it's a long, long time ago, and as I say, youngsters are coming up, and they probably know more about the films than I do. But it's great. I mean, it's good. But it's amazing now it's sort of carried on all them years.
And of course, as well as the books and games and comics still coming out, there's also Clone Wars on TV and a new Seth Green comedy called Star Wars Detours, and then Star Wars Underworld, a live-action TV series at some point in the future too. So even in just production terms, it'll be going strong for at least another 5 years, and then all the 3D film releases too.
Well, that's right, yes. I mean, I did quite a lot of stuff which was on the cutting room floor, but when they brought the the Blu-ray outtakes out on Empire, on Return of the Jedi, there's quite a lot of work involved that I'd done, which, you never even thought you'd ever see again, but it came out on the Blu-ray.
The main scene, of course, being Lieutenant Blount operating the Millennium Falcon's guns.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen all the deleted scenes. I'm still on DVD, not Blu-ray, I'm sorry.
Yeah, certainly.
But there must still be a lot of footage shot that still hasn't been seen for decades. Locked somewhere in a seal vault, no doubt, on Skywalker Ranch.
Well, yes, I'm sure there was. I mean, on Return of the Jedi, Bossk is hardly ever seen, but I was wearing that costume for quite a few days here and there. And because, when you think it's 30 years ago, it's very difficult to sort of recollect what you was doing, and it's only sort of two and a half years ago that I was asked about my work on the Star Wars projects, and I had to sort of try and think what costumes I was wearing and what I did. But since then, I've made a little bit of insight into certain things, and obviously chased things up on the internet, and it's all sort of come back to me. What I actually did and what I actually portrayed.
Now, I did a bit of digging on the internet, and the list I've got is this. See if you can add anything to it. Lieutenant Blount and also Bossk in Return of the Jedi, and then Giran, the Klaatu Nikto guard at the Rancor Pit, and then an Imperial officer and another Rebel officer and a Calamari warrior in the same film, and then also multiple Imperials and Empire Strikes Back. Have I missed anyone out?
Yeah, it's a lot of characters. I had to sort of try and think. I mean, one character escaped me was actually the Rancor keeper, Blount. But I found an old call sheet which had my name on it, down as Rancor keeper with Luke Skywalker and another guy. Well, it wasn't too bad. The costume itself, the headgear was the actual. Mask was a so-called prosthetic mask, and as you can imagine, with studio lighting and one thing and another, it was very difficult. Once you put it on, they didn't really like to take it off because it had to be tucked into the main costume. For example, your jacket or one thing or another. So you just had to suffer it, and occasionally you would put a little handheld air dryer. Well, not an air dryer, but a cold fan, and blow cold air into your mouth, which obviously helped, but it was still very uncomfortable.
And did you get direct instructions and get talked through things much?
Well, yes, you did. You had to, because you could see out of these masks through the eyes. They used to paint your face black so you couldn't see inside. But you did get interactions, yes, but it was difficult. You couldn't hear properly either. The assistant would probably come up and lead you, and then sort of explain where you was and this, that, and the other, and then obviously you would carry on from there. But it was very difficult to see out of these things because they didn't want to see your face underneath it. So what I can remember, it wasn't the best of jobs, but nonetheless, it was an exciting thing to do. I mean, I was interacting with Mark Hamill when we was on that sequence, and he was very good. He was saying, "Oh, watch your step because there's something in front of you." He would sort of explain if there was any hidden obstacles. I mean, you just got used to it. Before that, you see, I was on Flash Gordon, and I was wearing a mask on Flash Gordon in certain sequences. So it wasn't anything new.
Were there any moments when faced with a famous actor that you perhaps had known for years or whatever, that you were surprised by them? Or are there any anecdotes?
Well, no, because it was, how can I put it? I mean, being in this industry for so long, you just don't, they're all human beings at the end of the day, some better than others, of course. No, I mean, how can I put it? I mean, for example, I did Mission Impossible 1, and I was involved in quite a few sequences with Tom Cruise. Well, he's always been a big name, but it was nothing special because we just treat each other as actors, and either a performer or me on that film, a special effects technician. We all have a job to do, and well, for me personally, I don't feel that anybody's a really big star. They're sort of just doing the job. A lot of people think, oh my God, I'm working with so-and-so, but to be honest with you, I've never really felt that.
And were there any actors who were perhaps better at working with a non-human casting characters?
To be honest with you, I haven't really come across any bad people in that respect. You get the odd one or two, which I'll remain nameless, but on the whole, even if they're acting in a Shakespeare movie, for example, and then they go on to a sci-fi movie where there's a lot of blue screen, they still act to the best of their ability. It doesn't matter where they are. You see, they're trained actors, and they're trained to sort of perform whichever sequence they're doing, whether it be, as I say, something classical or something sci-fi. I must admit, though, when I worked on the Harry Potter films, I saw the three main young stars, the Harry and Hermione and Rupert, grow up from being 11 years old up to being 18, 19, and right from the day one, they were so nice and sort of, as kids are, but, they never changed to being anything but what it was like when they were youngsters. They was great when they left. Not really, no, because, you see, when they're plucked out of school or whatever, or drama school, to go on to something like the Harry Potter stuff, I think we had to sort of think, hang on a minute, this is my big break, and I don't want to spoil it. So, no, I don't spoil brats or anything. They just grew up normally, especially young Harry. I mean, he was just one of the boys. He'd just come in the morning and say, he'd talk to your first names, and because he'd worked with them on 4 or 5 different productions, it was like a big family.
Presumably most long-term projects must feel a bit like family after that long, but is it down to the people, or is it down to the length of time?
No, it's not actually. I mean, if you on some productions they gel together, and it depends on the crews, whether it be lighting, cameramen, rigging crews, or whatever, carpenters. If the whole thing gels together, then you get a better job at the end of it, and I think that's important. And I've been on many productions where you think, oh, I'm sorry to leave this, everybody's been great on this film. Let's hope we get back together one day. And 9 times out of the 10, we don't, because a lot of the guys will go on to another movie, I'll go on to another movie, and you may never come across each other for another 5 years. How can I put it? At the end of the day, I mean, it might look awful on screen, or you might get another production that's great and it makes loads of Oscars, but that doesn't mean to say it's been a nice film to work on. Aliens was a good film to work on. Everybody seemed to gel together on that. I enjoyed it very much. And then small productions, just as well as big productions. It just depends on the location, for example, the hours you work. It varies from film to film, really. No 2 films are the same to work on, because if you get different crews. I mean, Harry Potter's was a one-up because you had more or less the same crew right down from top to bottom. So, everybody knew each other so well that it was like one big family on that film. And then, of course, I've worked on other films where Rafaela De Laurentiis has produced them, and she normally uses the same people on her films, and I've worked on several, and that again was like a big family. You just sort of know each other so well, having sort of spent 12 hours a day for the last 9 months together, and you just sort of, you just gel together.
And have you found the same enjoyment in conventions as you had working on those films?
Yes, I mean, that's been an eye-opener for myself, actually, because the way people are really interested in the Star Wars stuff really sort of opened my eyes, because people who wasn't even born coming up to you and asking for your autographs, and they know more than I do about it because they're really into it, and like yourself probably. But no, I mean it's an eye opener because each to their own. I mean, I'm not really into that sort of intense sort of. I like all stuff, so I've never got one sort of project which I'm really involved in. So, yes, it's good. I mean, you get a lot of unusual questions asked, and but you meet very nice people. I thought it was, great actually to talk to people and listen to their views as well. But no, I mean, on the whole, it's quite an experience to sort of go to different countries and see how different people from different countries to the films, and it's a worldwide thing, really. I mean, I went to Tokyo earlier in the year, and I don't speak Japanese, but some of the guys was into the Star Wars stuff more than I ever thought of, but very, very nice people.
So you've been doing conventions for several years now and are still doing special effects. Are you eventually going to drop one of them?
Well, I don't do background no more. I mean, I finished doing background shortly after I finished on Return of the Jedi. I shortly went on to the Neverending Story in 1982, and I've been in special effects ever since. It's only this autograph stuff came to light in about 2002, which I don't mind doing if I've got the spare time to do it. For example, I've got a convention in Holland end of November, which is a weekend. So it should allow me, even if I'm on a project, I could get away for a weekend and do a signing, which is nice to do it now and again, and meet people on that side of the industry. Just normal people who's interested in certain things that they really have their head around.
And are there any big aspirations or plans for the next few years?
Well, not really, no. I mean, I'm not a young guy anymore, I mean, I've sort of, how can I put it? I don't want to take on as much as I used to do. I just sort of want to relax and enjoy life's pleasures, as I say. I've moved to a cottage in Buckinghamshire in January, and it's in the countryside. I'm just enjoying that side of the life now. So depending on what projects I get offered, then I'll keep on doing it. But I don't chase jobs no more now, and if the right job comes along, then if it suits me, I'll do it. But I'm not really sort of wanting to chase jobs like I used to do.
And if people are interested in following your work or asking questions, are you on Twitter or Facebook, or have your own website or anything like that?
Well, I'm on the Facebook, Sky-Fi's signers forum. So, you just search me out on Facebook.
Now, before we end, James and Jezza tend to offer what they call the soapbox to people to talk about projects they're working on and want to plug, or any charities they care for, or charity events that they're up.
Well, I haven't got any charitable sort of organisation I really contribute to, but if anybody wanted to sort of ask me to do anything for a charity, then I would be happy to sort of contribute to something. It's something I sort of haven't been involved in working for charities.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us about everything. I found it really
well,
interesting.
If I can be any further help in the future, just you got my email address, and I hope it all goes well.
Certainly, we'd love to hear from you again, hear more if you have the time for us, or if you get involved in Prometheus 2 or anything major, then it'd be great to talk to you again about that.
Yeah.
Maybe even talking about Prometheus when it's less spoilery for those that haven't yet managed to see it.
Yeah.
We'll definitely be in touch.
Okay, Jason. Well, yeah, all the best, and thanks very much. Yeah.
Thank you.